Today's video is going to be a lot different from the ones I've posted so far. I was scrolling on the Wizard101 subreddit and a post caught my attention, partially because it was made by my only commenter. The post had a decent amount of upvotes and quite a few comments, though most of them were just the poster arguing with someone else. I wanted to make a video on this because I also see it as an issue. I'll also try to provide possible solution ideas at the end because it's no use if I just list a problem without attempting to give a solution. So without further ado, let's begin. Most of us know how broken Malistaire's gear is. In the Reddit post, we see two gear pieces 60 levels apart. The main argument against this post is that because the one on the left is common, it should be weaker than the one on the right. The counter argument is fair in face value, but once you consider everything else, you might see a bigger problem. I agree with the argument the poster presented. Check it out if you're interested. Malistaire gear is usually obtained at level 100, the minimum requirement to do the Darkmoor dungeon. This is around the level you'd be at the time you beat Morganth. This fact will be important later on in this video. I'll be arguing based on other less talked about facts. In order to do this, we'll start from the very beginning, Wizard City. Between Wizard City and Marleybone, you will generally be using Bazaar gear. You'll be using pack gear if you have the crowns for it, and the gear from packs up to that point will generally be better than the gear from the Bazaar. Once you reach level 30, you will most certainly be doing Mount Olympus. The gear it gives is solid, and a certain item from Mount Olympus has a similar problem to Darkmoor gear, in the sense that there is no clear upgrade for another 60 to 70 levels. That's the Sky Iron Hasta, which only has clear upgrades from packs. The gear you get from Mount Olympus will often carry you to waterworks. If you would like to upgrade your Mount Olympus gear via crafting to further improve, you have the option to do so. Once again, another point you'll want to remember for later. Between Mount Olympus and waterworks, you still have options. Heck, within Mount Olympus itself, you can grind either the Senator's set or Zeus's set. Zeus's set being slightly better than both the crafted gear and the Senator's gear. Despite that, both the Senator set and the crafted Adept set are still viable. At level 40, we have the option to go to Barkingham Palace, which is fairly tedious. Similarly, the drops from Barkingham Palace are also split up into 3 tiers. The low tier equipment from this dungeon is worse than the low tier equipment from Olympus. However, Barkingham Palace also comes with rings, themes, decks, and amulets, while Olympus does not. 1-to-1, the best gear from Barkingham Palace is not 100% better than the gear from Olympus, but the whole set together is more powerful. We'll talk more about sets later in this video. Following level 40, the next gear set you'll come across is Malistaire's gear, which comes from the final world of the Ark. You will be roughly level 50 at this point. This time, the gear comes in 2 tiers, and low tier gear pretty much matches the high tier Olympus gear in terms of effectiveness. Naturally, the high tier gear outdoes this. The high tier gear is dropped, and it can also be crafted. Still, most people will usually skip the grind and aim for level 60, Waterworks gear. Waterworks gear is a huge step up from pretty much everything that came prior. In fact, this set of 3 items is so powerful, it won't be replaced by anything except maybe pack gear until level 100, when you will get to Darkmoor. Now there are some dungeons sprinkled in between level 60 and level 100. You have Zigzag, Atlantis, and Tartarus. The Zigzag gear isn't quite an upgrade, and is fairly similar to how Barkingham Palace is to Olympus. It's an alternative. There's 7 gear pieces from the Zigzag for each of the 3 tiers, while Waterworks only has 3 gear pieces for each school. 1-to-1, at least for Storm. Zigzag gear always has better damage except for the boots. Remember the Sky Iron Hasta you got at level 30? Yeah, there's nothing outside the packs that's power corrupted yet. At level 70, you have Poseidon gear. This is not an upgrade, and like the Zigzag, it's more of an alternative, albeit one that's favored far less than both Zigzag and Waterworks. Buff Poseidon gear, King Zal. On the left is the Poseidon gear, and on the right is the Waterworks gear. You'll get to Tartarus at level 90, and from there you'll definitely want to get Blade of the Felled Titan, but that's it. Hades gear is not a very clear upgrade, and it lacks in the damage area while having more critical. It can be forgiven because Darkmoor comes right after, but if Darkmoor didn't exist, this could possibly have been a problem. You will definitely not be grinding for this because Darkmoor is only 10 levels away, and by the way, you're probably still using the Sky Iron Hasta if you haven't bought any packs. Darkmoor gear is basically better in every single way, and this will probably be the point you'll switch from the Sky Iron Hasta to the staff, even though the staff doesn't give any damage. You could also do Morganth farming, which is pretty bad compared to Darkmoor, but some decks and rings are equivalent if not slightly better. I basically dragged you all through a whole story up until this point, but I promise it'll speed up now because, well, there's nothing really after Darkmoor that's a direct upgrade. At level 130, we encounter 2 things. The end of an arc, which is such a good ending that it could be the ending of the main story, and the catacombs, where the infamous Dragoon gear can be obtained. Dragoon gear is very, very difficult to obtain. Either you craft it or get it from the Fellspawn key boss, both of which will take you ages. The boots are pretty much a direct upgrade except it loses all its pierce. but the helmet is more ambiguous. The robes do not follow this trend. You get way more health, slightly more power pip, and crit block, not sure if anyone cares about that stat all that much, and you get 3 pierce. Mal's robe demolishes it in every other category. These dungeons are 30 levels apart and the Dragoon gear is such a pain to grind, yet the only 2 pieces of gear that are objectively better are the boots and the wand. Most of all, it's far from fun. The Aether Titan's drops are similar. The hat and boots are like Dragoon's, while the armor is still significantly worse than Malistaire's. The Darkmoor robe still reigns supreme, even after the end of a whole arc and another new dungeon. It's quite similar to how Tartarus was to Waterworks. You might grind it for a few items, but you will realistically omit it. Here's the thing, there's no Darkmoor to Darkmoor. There's nothing that clearly surpasses Malistaire's robe until level 170, and even then, the accuracy of Malistaire's robe will probably never be beaten. This robe has more HP, less power pip, more shad, less accuracy, less crit, more damage, less resist, and more pierce, but only for Storm. Keep in mind, this is meta PvE gear 70 whole levels after Darkmoor, and by the way, this is also end of an arc gear. Yet we have 4 stats that are worse than Darkmoor's if we include the fact that the pierce is Storm only. I want to emphasize that I am not saying that this robe is worse than Malistair's robe. It's not. It's the fact that 70 whole levels later, the end of an arc gear still can't have all of its stats be better than Darkmoor's gear. Earlier, we saw that the end of the arc gear in Arc 1 was objectively better than Mount Olympus. In Arc 2, Morgant's gear kind of sucks except for the Thames rings and whatnot, but there were viable alternatives and a replacement for Waterworks gear. For Darkmoor gear, it's not so clear cut and dry. There's a 70 level gap and some wizards are still using Malistair's robe. The further we go as wizards, the less freedom we have when it comes to gear. I've gone on and on about problems and pretty much went through the journey of your average wizard, so let me actually talk about solutions. Nerfing Darkmoor gear would just piss off everyone who grinded for it, so that's not a solution. I believe KingZell is underutilizing one of its best systems, the set system observed in some pieces of gear. If you were to wear all of the Storm items from Darkmoor, you would have 100% Storm accuracy, 25% from the robe and 5% from the boots. You'd only fizzle on special spells like Shadow and Fuse spells and that one Kraken item spell. Breaking off from that robe would be difficult for most, but what if, hear me out, the items themselves gave no accuracy in this case. Instead, the accuracy would come as a set bonus. With 2 items on, you'd have plus 10% Storm accuracy, with 3 you would have plus 18%, and with 4 you'd have plus 24%, assuming we count the staff as part of the gear set. This example is still a nerf, but it's not that crazy of a nerf, and it would allow players to slowly ease out of the gear. If the devs wanted to create something equivalent in accuracy, they could just make it so for 2 pieces you'd have 12% accuracy, for 3 pieces you'd have 22%, and for 4 you'd have 30%. If more gear had set bonuses, players could switch out of Malistair's gear earlier. Additionally, if there were more spells that had really low accuracy but were very powerful, having 100% accuracy wouldn't be as useful because, well, you won't have a 100% chance of successfully casting a 55% accuracy spell. I won't dive further into this idea because it could also be its own video. I believe to solve this problem, Wiz would have to do a massive gear audit, introducing set bonuses to a lot of gear while also adjusting the values they already have. I feel like solving this would be easier than solving the Sky Iron has the problem, which I think is impossible to do anything about. That concludes my video. I hope I didn't enrage or confuse you, but if I did, let me know why in the comments, and also check out my previous videos. See ya.